They never could remember my name, so they were always like, "Yo, ball guy, what's up?" And I kind of liked it. I think I've been roasting coffee 12 years. Professionally, probably 7. I kind of did it for a hobby. I don't do drugs anymore. I only have one drug. I self-medicate with caffeine, and it's like my last addiction, so it has to be good. It's my great, great, great grandmother was a coffee roaster in Yugoslavia. And that there's this spoon that used to be big, now it's a little bit of a nub, has been passed down to the mothers because their job was to take green coffee over an open fire in a kettle and roast coffee. And I remember going to Yugoslavia because I was born in Germany to meet my grandmother's people. And I remember I was real young, and I walked into a house with a dirt floor, and there was a hole in the ceiling, and in the middle of the floor was this old lady sitting on a box roasting coffee. So I guess it's in my blood. Coffee's really opened up doors for me to hang out with really wonderful people, which kind of fit my DNA with the learning of a language because it was all very relational. A lot of hands touch coffee. I went to a crackhead in Pittsburgh and told him I needed a logo, and he drew a picture of my face and spelt guy wrong. And I went out and bought a roaster and a bunch of green beans, and then we moved back to Watauga County, and I started roasting on the porch and roasting out of the back of a pickup, and people would call me at all hours of the night, and they probably thought I was selling drugs because they were like, "Hey man, you got any Colombian on you? Can you meet me at the corner of Skate World tonight at 10 o'clock? And I was like, "Yeah." Man, just a lot of people have helped me over the years. I spent a lot of time learning how to roast coffee, and what we found is specialty coffee properly roasted sells itself, and it doesn't need a lot of hype. If people like what's in the cup, they'll buy it. I've got a mobile coffee espresso rig that ran on biodiesel and solar panels, and started at the farmer's market roasting on site and dosing people with coffee. And eventually people would come up and say, "Hey, we want to carry your coffee." And I said, "Well, I can't really sell you my coffee because I need my coffee," and came to a crossroads where I had to decide whether or not I was going to be a wholesale roaster or a coffee shop. And since I don't like managing employees and I hate retail, I decided wholesale roasting was the way to go. So word of mouth. I've never asked for an account.
That's how it happened.
Yeah, people just love coffee, and they come and find me. I don't have a business model. So I just watched Fight Club, the movie, and I wouldn't recommend it. It's pretty trashed, but it's actually a brilliant movie. And I decided that I would start a business that I would never tell anybody about. And the only way, rule number 1 of Fight Club is you never talk about Fight Club. And if you have to ask, you don't know. So I really thought it was great because it was that whole I can't tell you, which makes people want to learn more. But the whole thing with the ghetto and beans and bikes and kids, that was really a powerful moment when I saw those kids with those bikes, and I realized that businesses can do good, and that people are not a business transaction, that they're important, and that not everything involves money, and not everything has to be about money, and not everything at the end of the day makes any sense if it was all about money, because when you die you can't take it with you. So I wanted to have a business model that empowered rather than exploit coffee growing communities, and then I realized that really I wanted a business model that empowered my local community as well. Project Eden started out of a desire to really understand and integrate sustainability and traceability into the supply chain. And what I was realizing, I didn't realize what I was doing is I was walking dirt with coffee farmers, listening to their story, hearing how they were having a hard time of it, and every year that we would go down and every year that I would get to know more and more people, it dawned on me that really the people who are at the heart of what I do weren't getting a fair shake on the price they were being paid. And partly it's because Project Eden, I could see a gap. The growers grow coffee to sell it, but they really don't know how to evaluate coffee to see if it's good. They just think it's good. So I started working with Don Rodrigo, an agro engineer, and we came up with this idea of what happens if we work with two growers and we teach them how to grow really amazing coffee, and then we give them the vocabulary to and skill set to evaluate coffee, that they will have a language then that will help them to speak with coffee buyers, which would then automatically build confidence in the buyer that the coffee grower had a legit product. Well, that was cool until we got further into it and realized that they're kind of locked into the supply chain and that a lot of people don't want them out of it. And then I started to realize, well, if Project Eden is going to teach people how to grow better coffee and how to evaluate coffee, we need to be able to buy the coffee, the red cherry at the gate, so that we mitigate the risk on the farmer, pay the grower more. And then we need to work with buyers, because what you have is you have a monolingual, monocultural grower, Spanish, and you have a monolingual, monocultural buyer in English. And when they meet, it's a bilingual, bicultural conversation that involves money. That is complicated. So as Project Eden starts to take form, we realize that we need to do some cultural stuff. We need to help people understand how do you engage people who are desperate to sell something and not overpromise and underdeliver, but you actually build into the transaction sustainability and profitability for both the grower and the buyer.
Gave me about a half pound of Mexican single origin coffee, wrapped up in a 5-pound wholesale bag, like a pound of ground beef, right? And he handed it to me, and he said, "Here, take this home, try this out. This stuff will rock your face off." Clearly, you can see that worked. But that right there was my personal introduction into craft coffee. That's where things changed for me as a consumer, because I was a Maxwell House guy, embarrassingly enough, prior to that. But that was the point where coffee, my world and coffee changed. And I still remember that pot of coffee the next morning when I took my first sip of that coffee that next morning, how very different it was from the stuff that I had been drinking previously. I said, man, I've been missing out. I had no idea that coffee could be this good. And he truly cares about people at the end of the day. Don is referred to as a master roaster. Mm-hmm. He is very skilled at his craft. And the coffee that he produces is unlike anything that you've ever tasted.
Every year, I have amazing obstacles to overcome because of small business in a small town. There's always a new upstart that's trying to cut my feet out from under me, and it's difficult. But I've decided every year that if somebody's going to break Ball Guy Brew, it's going to be me. I'm going to do everything in my power just to trash it. So every year I start out trying to screw up Ball Guy Brew, and every year we succeed. So I love people, and I love coffee, and I love what coffee can do with people.